Well, good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well today. Just checking to make sure my mic is actually turned on, that I did that. Yes, I did. Hope you're doing well today. It's a beautiful day in Winnipeg. My name is Tim Hague Sr. Welcome to Coffee with Tim. I am a speaker, author, executive director of U-Turn Parkinson's, and I have Parkinson's disease, and I am a member of the PD Avengers. If you don't know what the PD Avengers are yet, you need to go to pdavengers.org and look at signing up to join a global alliance of people with Parkinson's and our friends standing together to demand change in how Parkinson's disease is seen and treated. But welcome here today. Today we're going to talk about what's been on the bedside stand reading material of recent, some of the things that I've been reading, some of the takeaways that I've had from it. Quite interesting. We're going to talk about a bit of race relationships in the States, what a brown man like me thinks about some of those things, and and see if we can get some of your comments. So we'll give everybody a chance to maybe sign on and say hello to a few folks. If you join us, give me a thumbs up. Let me know if you like what you're hearing or not. Leave me any comments or questions in the comments, and I'll try to get to you during the show or after, as is possible. But first things first, this morning I want to talk to you about U-Turn Parkinson's. If you live in Winnipeg or in Manitoba, I want to make sure that you're aware of U-Turn Parkinson's, our wellness center here that we founded almost 5 years ago. This next April 2021 will be 5 years. It's stinking hard to imagine that it's been that long already, but it has. There's a number of things available to you that we run classes 4 days a week right now, and that should be more when we restart our north side up in the north end of town in hopefully the new year. But there are a variety of classes from rock steady boxing to yoga to stretch and strength to speech language, both Loud Crowd, Speak Out, and U-Tunes, our singing group that we'd like you to get involved in. It's all great for taking care of your voice and taking care of your body, as well as various community events that we do to provide community and support for folks, especially during this time of COVID. And if you're not able to get out and come to class, depending on what they do to our COVID status again, we have online classes that you can find at uturnparkinsons.org. Come check those out. We've got classes that are just always available on YouTube that you can find us at UTurnPD, as well as every Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock with Coach Jordan. So lots of things going on at U-Turn Parkinson's, and if you are in town and want to take part in our Christmas fundraiser that's going on, it's called the Holiday Season Mystery Gift Box, or Mystery Box, the Holiday Season Mystery Box. You won't know what's in it, but it's going to be really cool stuff that you're going to like getting, and it's a little surprise. You just make a donation, and we deliver it to you. But more information will be coming on that on the website shortly. I'm probably a little bit premature in even advertising it because it's not ready yet, so don't tell any of my staff that I said anything, okay? Good morning, Jamie. Good morning, everybody who's tuning in. Glad to see you. And yes, everyone, you will note that we are back on Facebook Live, 10 o'clock on Fridays. We'll do our best to be here every week. We gave YouTube a little try. Well, that wasn't so hot. That didn't work out so well. So we're going to stick to Facebook for the time being, and maybe in time we'll add in YouTube as well. But let's jump into the things we want to talk about. There's a number of books that I've either got on the go or have just finished that I want to tell you about this morning. I have now dropped them on the floor. I'm back. But a few books, quite interesting reads that I want to tell you about. Do I have everything? I'm missing one. Where it is? Oh well, you don't need to see them all. Two that the one I just finished, two that I just finished. One is Uncle Tom's Cabin, written by Harriet Beecher Stowe back in the 1850s. Fascinating book in that it was the #1 bestseller for a number of years. And yeah, I got it very cheap. I actually got these 3 for $10. Woo! Good Manitoban. Back in 1850, she was the #1 bestseller. The only book that was selling more, the only author that was selling more books in the United States at the time was, quote unquote, God. The Bible was the only thing that was outselling Uncle Tom's Cabin back in 1855, 1856, somewhere around there. As she told the story of Uncle Tom and various other characters in her book. relaying very graphic, very real stories of what it was like to live with slavery back in the day. I also just finished rereading Tom Sawyer. Again, another one of those books that's very graphic in its definition and depiction of what it was like to live with slavery back in the day. I finished those two. I'm still working on, excuse me, still working on a biography of Frederick Douglass. You put him in line with Martin Luther King Jr. and various other great leaders of the black movement throughout history. Fascinating read if you are into biographies and if you're into understanding kind of what was going on in the minds of great thinkers around slavery. He was a well-known abolitionist, speaker. If you have a look at him, one of the things that I find most interesting about Frederick is that throughout the course of the book, he's described as being mulatto because he was mixed. He had one parent who was white, or at least part white, another parent who was black. I'm considered mulatto today. What a difference. I was stunned when I read that he was considered mixed, and that everybody knew that he was mixed because he was so fair-skinned. Interesting. Difficult book to read. You have to really be into the subject and really be into biographies if you want to read this kind of book, but I would strongly suggest it if you want to understand history of America as far as black history is concerned. I am still working on that book, like I said, and I'm working on Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer's most sold book of all time. This did way better than Tom Sawyer, I'm told, and very interesting read. All of these books, very difficult to read. Not your light, easy, pick it up and just burn through it kind of books. Reading Huck Finn is almost like reading in a different language. It's sort of English, but you really have to sort through what they're saying because the dialect and the language is very, very different from today. But the story is fascinating. The story is wonderful. It is compelling, it is gripping, it is fascinating to listen to and to take in, and I would strongly encourage you having a read of them. Now, if you are a reader at all, you know that most of these books have had a difficult history. You know that there have been times when people have talked about banning them, not having them in schools, et cetera, primarily because the N-word is on every other page. But folks, I would strongly encourage you to disregard those arguments. We need to understand our history. We need to understand where we've come from and what's going on in the world. And the only way that we'll make it forward in the future peacefully is by understanding where we've come from. Last book that I would recommend is The Book of Negroes by Lawrence Hill. Absolutely excellent book. Very, very interesting read on a young lady who was kidnapped from Africa and brought to the States as a slave. So why in the world am I reading all these books and why in the world am I telling you about them? Well, it's quite frankly with an eye to gaining a better understanding of our shared history. That I've been reading classics that I've not read before, specifically Tom Sawyer, Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. All of these books have had their controversy. Like I said, they're not easy to read, so why in the world read them? Why pick them up and go at this again? Well, in our current context of racial unrest in the U.S. and in light of my own past, I wanted to gain a better understanding of black history in North America. These works on the subject highlight in graphic form the horrors of slavery and the historical context of Africans in America. As many of you know, I was adopted and raised in, what shall we call it, a white home. Even though I have 5 siblings who are also biracial and adopted, Mom and Dad were both white. So I didn't grow up with any real understanding of the black community's view of history. So while I've known my birth mom for many years, she also is white, I do not know my birth father, who is black. Thus you might understand some of the motivation for reading these novels. Hey, Bob Kane, good to see you, man. Speaking of Kansas City and white friends and white family, good to see you. You'll catch on what we're talking about here. So how do we understand the struggles of today or where we're going in the future with race relations? I think we have to start in understanding our past, our shared history. As I've read these accounts, these various books of life in America under slavery, I've tried to imagine what life must have felt like. I've tried to imagine being a young black man living in West Africa, living my life, going about what I consider to be probably a pretty mundane, simple life. And the interesting part for me is I did a DNA test a little while back, a few years ago. Turns out that I am about 50% English, a little bit of other white West European in me, and about 40% West African black. Quite interesting. So more than likely my black heritage all came from the slave trade. So I imagine being this young guy living in West Africa back in the day, then one day a raiding party invades my village. I've heard about these before, but this is the first time it's happened to my village. I imagine that I'm out in the field, and I see what's going on. I try to make it to my family's predetermined hiding spot, but I get caught out in the open, literally, with nowhere to go. I'm kidnapped from my family, my home, shackled. I'm marched to the coast, which at times, depending on where you live in Africa, could take months. It's certainly further than I've ever been from my little village. I have no idea where I am or where I'm being taken. All I know for sure is that the tales that have been told are those of those who have been taken over the sea, never return. Welcome to Parkinson's, folks. I'm placed in a ship bigger than anything that I've ever imagined, with dozens, if not hundreds, of other people. People from villages I've never been to, people who do not speak my language, people who nonetheless are like me, terrified. People like me who find themselves in a dank, dark, putrid hold of a ship being taken where? We don't know. Over the sea, somewhere. The only people not in chains who speak my language have another language of their own that is spoken through the crack of a whip, a language I learned quickly to avoid at all cost. After what seems like an interminable, death-filled trip across the sea, we arrive. Where? I have no idea. I'm separated into a group of young men and away from anyone from my village and anyone who speaks my language. I'm literally alone. I have no idea where I am, and no one with me with whom I can converse. I'm stripped, literally, washed by having buckets of water heaved on me, ultimately paraded in front of a crowd naked, save for my chains, finally dressed in rags, loaded into a wagon, and taken where? I don't know. On my arrival, I'm placed in a room with more people than can possibly comfortably sleep on the floor. The next morning, I'm introduced to the rest of my life, that of picking cotton. Since there is no shared language, the process is demonstrated to me, and the importance of hard work brought home through the crack of a whip. Kidnapping, trafficking, forced labor, deprivation, humiliation, all performed legally under the Constitution and its laws of the United States of America. And I want to read that again for you. Kidnapping, trafficking, forced labor, deprivation, humiliation, all performed legally under the Constitution and its laws of the United States of America. In time, yes, the slaves were emancipated by President Lincoln. And in time, blacks were allowed to legally mix with whites in 1964. In 1964, the year of my birth, President Lyndon Johnson signed into law the Civil Rights Act abolishing racial segregation in the U.S. That racist holdover from the days of slavery that said whites would not go to the same school as blacks and blacks could not eat in the same restaurants as whites. The year of my birth, it was finally legal for blacks and whites to mix in public. This is but a small piece of beginning to understand the history of African people, black people in America. Until we understand it, come to terms with it, to some degree or other make peace with it, we are going to continue to struggle moving forward. Until we understand our past, we will never fully understand terms like Black Lives Matter. Why am I talking to you about this today? You don't hear me talk about politics very often. You don't hear me bring up religion very often. I don't typically wander into things that could be quote-unquote controversial. I kind of stick to positive conversations, perseverance, working out, riding my new bike, etc., etc. So why am I talking about this today? Because I want us to live in peace. To have peace, we must know one another, understand our shared history, and walk into the future united. We need to know people who don't look like us. We need to know people who don't come from the same background that we come from. We need to know people who don't agree with us on everything. We need to have on our phones multiple news outlets, not just one. If I were able to show you my news outlets on my phone, you would find, in no particular order here, CNN, Fox News, CBC, BBC. For a long time I had Al Jazeera, The Guardian. I read as widely as I possibly can so that I can understand all viewpoints. Because how can I truly know if I disagree with something or understand something unless I can interact with it, converse with it? How do I know what people have gone through if I don't talk to them? I have a friend on Facebook, and I can truly call him a friend because we went to high school together. So I guess right now, these 30 plus years later, we'd be more like acquaintances. But in high school, we were friends. And he said something the other day on Facebook related to this, and he was making his point. And the thing that stood out to me the most clearly and the most poignantly was the fact that he said, in talking to my friends, I've discovered. And nothing else that he said mattered to me after that. Whatever his point was almost definitely secondary to the fact that he had relationships with people that don't look like him, with people that don't come from his economic background, with people who don't come from his societal background. I never used to stutter before Parkinson's. He has friends who aren't like him, that don't look like him, that don't come from everything that he's come from. And folks, that's what we need if we want to understand and go forward into our future peacefully. We have to have friends that don't look like us. I want you to pick up a book and learn about the sins of our past so that we do not repeat them again in the future against anyone. And the only way we can go into the future peacefully is to understand our past, to see it clearly through the eyes of those who experienced it, to understand how they felt about it, to understand what it means to only have had segregation come about in 1964, 55 years ago, in the year of my birth. 55 years ago, it became legal for black folks and white folks to mix in the United States. It was only 35 years ago that my dear blonde, blue-eyed wife and I were married. And 35 years ago, we would get stared at as we walked through the mall. It has been a very, very, very short history from slavery to today. So take some time to pick up some books that you think you might disagree with. Take some time to tune into a news station that you think you might disagree with. Take some time to make friends with folks that don't look like you and who you might disagree with. And learn to see life through the lens of someone else. You may not come to agree with them. You may come away with the same opinions that you had before. But I know this for sure, that if we are willing to do this, if we are willing to get out of our comfort zone and experience things that don't naturally fit our long-held opinions, we will be able to walk into the future more peacefully, more united, because we have a better understanding of who one another are. So as we go through the rest of this year with COVID, as we walk through an election in the United States, as we walk through a potential election coming up anytime with a minority government in Canada, let's remember to live in peace. Let's remember to understand one another. Seek first to understand, second to criticize. As a good book once said, quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Listen first, speak second, and put off getting angry with one another. So that's it for today. Thanks a lot, guys. We will do our very best to be back here next Friday with Coffee with Tim. Hopefully something interesting to talk about. And until then, live your best, persevere, and live at peace as long as it's up to you. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you later.